The 14th Amendment is not about giving citizenship to just anybody who comes into the United States whenever they so feel. But yet that's essentially what we've done. If you're an illegal immigrant, but you have a child in the United States, they call them anchor babies, then you can make an argument to stay. Now, Donald Trump wants to end birthright citizenship. And in my opinion, I think it should be ended. And I'm going to tell you why. This was something that wasn't meant to be extended to just any and everybody. The 14th Amendment has a very particular, specific, and historic and monumental reasoning for its existence, and it pertained to freed men who were formerly enslaved, not any and everybody else. So let's talk about it. Hey guys, welcome to the Shermichael Singleton Show. If you've been watching the news and you're aware that the Supreme Court just heard arguments from the federal government, being the Trump administration, and the Attorney General of New Jersey about the president wanting to end birthright citizenship, arguing about the 14th Amendment, also arguing about whether the lower court can have some jurisprudence over the executive branch. That's some other complicated stuff. But the crux of it for me pertains to the 14th Amendment. And that's what I really want to talk about. The 14th Amendment's Citizenship Clause was not written as a grand philosophical treatise on human rights. It was born out of a specific and unparalleled moral crisis, the centuries-long enslavement of African people on American soil and the subsequent refusal to recognize them as citizens. Even after emancipation, the 13th Amendment obviously outlawed slavery. The men, the women, and children, they weren't immigrants. They were not guests. They did not cross a border. They were brought to the United States against their will and then ultimately born in the United States. They labored in the United States. They contributed to the wealth that we now have today that was built upon their backs. And yet the formerly enslaved were denied the most basic legal personhood in the United States, and that's citizenship. And so this is what makes freed slaves a singular constitutional category to me. And it is why their enshrinement into citizenship was not just a legal correction. It frankly was a moral imperative without any precedent or parallel. And to conflate this, as some are, to conflate the experience of former slaves and the purpose of the 14th Amendment with individuals who willingly entered the United States in violation of our laws, often with calculated intent of exploiting birthright citizenship, is both just historically dishonest, constitutionally indefensible, and frankly a slap in the face to what freed slaves went through during their enslavement and even after becoming free, what they had to go through to get some modicum of respect and dignity for their personhood. Prior to the 14th Amendment, the legal status of African Americans, both enslaved and free, was in this sort of weird, precarious, and really a fundamentally unstable predicament, guys. And if you have forgotten, let me remind you of Dred Scott versus Sanford. That was the 1857 Supreme Court case that unambiguously declared that no black person, whether you were free or whether you were enslaved, could be a citizen of the United States. Imagine that. Imagine being beaten like crazy, being raped, being tormented, working cotton fields, and doing any and everything else to build up an economy of a nation, being born on the soil of that nation and being told, because of the Dred Scott case, doesn't matter if you're free or enslaved, you can never be a citizen of this country. The consequences were frankly unbearable in my mind, and the consequences were catastrophic. Freedmen were born in America. As I stated, they contributed to America, yet remained legally foreign to the nation of their birth. Now, how in the hell is that the same as an illegal immigrant? Unlike immigrants who come into the country illegally, freed slaves had no homeland to return to. They had no sovereignty to which they owed allegiance. They didn't have citizenship papers from a foreign consulate. They were made stateless by the very nation that brought them here and held them in bondage. That is not the same. They were uniquely created and excluded by American law. They weren't visitors seeking opportunity, but victims of our nation's most horrendous original sin. So the 14th Amendment, in my mind, and its Citizenship Clause, as complicated as the 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause may be to some, is not all that complicated at all. The 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause was not an extension of opportunity to outsiders. It was a recognition of belonging to those already within who had been unjustly denied citizenship, something that they deserved, that they were owed. In contrast, individuals who enter the United States unlawfully or overstaying visas, whether for economic, personal, or political reasons, are doing so in defiance of our nation's sovereignty. They're not victims of constitutional exclusion as formerly enslaved were. These immigrants are actors who breached the legal order established by the Constitution itself. So to extend to them the same constitutional protections designed specifically for freed slaves and their descendants is to invert the moral logic of the 14th Amendment. It just doesn't make any sense to me, and it should defy logic to you. In recent decades, it has become common for foreign nationals to arrive in the United States before childbirth, precisely to take advantage of the misapplication of birthright citizenship. And trust me, when I say this, it isn't a coincidence, guys. It's a calculated strategy to secure a foothold in a country they have no legal right to enter. The child born on U.S. soil becomes a U.S. citizen, and then the parents can claim the right to remain, often leveraging family reunification policies or constitutional protections. This is not an act of injustice committed by the United States, as was the case with freed men. It is a manipulation of U.S. law by those who chose and continue to disregard it. And the Constitution should not reward lawbreaking with the highest status a nation can bestow, citizenship. The framers of the 14th Amendment did not design it as a mechanism for universal access to citizenship via childbirth alone. Just think about how ludicrous that sounds. They understood citizenship as a function of political allegiance, legal status, which is important here, and societal membership. That's why the phrase, quote, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, was included, not as a redundancy, but as a restriction. They envisioned the amendment covering those who were American in everything but name only. Freedmen, born and raised under the American flag, but long denied its protections. Today, the children born to individuals deliberately violating immigration laws are not the same as freedmen. They are not in the same class. They are not American in law, loyalty, or legal claim. Their presence is contingent upon the unlawful entry of their parents. Their birth, while taking place on U.S. soil, lacks the foundational condition of jurisdictional allegiance that the 14th Amendment demands. Only freedmen and their descendants qualify for that. And so to treat these two categories, freedmen and their children, their descendants essentially, and children of unlawful entrants as equivalent is to collapse justice into generosity and to subvert the constitutional purpose for political convenience. Now, immigration is a policy. Slavery was an injustice. Now, look, some may argue that the United States has long been a nation of immigrants. This is true, but it is beside the point. The immigrant narrative is not the freedman's narrative. Immigration is a matter of policy, choice, consent. Slavery, on the other hand, was a matter of legal coercion, violence, and systemic exclusion. No immigrant, legal or otherwise, has ever been deemed 3/5 of a person in the Constitution. Well, my descendants were. No immigrant has ever been barred from citizenship by race as a literal matter of federal law. Slaves were. No immigrant group has ever endured centuries of bondage and torture, followed by decades of legal apartheid within the country of their birth. Slaves and their descendants were. So to grant the benefits of the 14th Amendment to children of unlawful entrants as if their status mirrors that of freedmen is not only disrespectful, it's a slap in the face of the descendants of those slaves. It's a slap in the face to what slaves went through and endured. And it is literally to strip the amendment of its sacred specificity. It is to unmoor the Constitution from history. It is to replace justice with sentiment. Sentimentalities do not erase the experience of freedmen, and it doesn't even capture just how fundamentally important and essential the 14th Amendment was to giving freedmen the citizenship they deserved. The United States does not owe citizenship to all born on its soil, especially when that birth results from actions taken in defiance of its laws. Citizenship is not an accident of geography. It is a bond of legal and moral belonging. The freedmen earned that bond through Jesus Christ, so much suffering. I mean, just to think about it, you don't want to think about it. You really, really don't. Their loyalty, their forced estrangement from their homeland to our country to help build it, there isn't any comparison. No other group before or since has a claim like theirs. So the 14th Amendment must be interpreted not through the lens of modern immigration activism, which is what it's currently being interpreted as, in my opinion, but through the lens of constitutional intent and historical truth. And to preserve its integrity, we must honor its purpose, not to reward unlawful entry, but to restore dignity and full belonging to those to whom it was once unjustly denied. Any departure from this understanding risks returning a constitutional remedy for America's greatest injustice into a legal loophole for its most contentious policy debates, an outcome the framers of the 14th Amendment neither envisioned nor would have tolerated. This isn't about being against immigrants. This isn't about recognizing that we should have legal immigration. This isn't about welcoming people into our country. But what it is about is not conflating the experience of the formerly enslaved who became freedmen, who did not have rights for the country that they died on its soil, were enslaved on its soil, toiled the soil for the economic benefit of the country, and still lacked the most fundamental thing any person within the confines of a country deserved to have if they were born there, and that is citizenship. Now, some people may want to second guess this and say, well, because this amendment was passed, illegal immigrants should also be able to have the same right. I don't agree. I do think we should end birthright citizenship. It doesn't make sense for us to allow people to come into the country illegally, have a child, and then suddenly be able to stay. How does that make any sense? The 14th Amendment was never the purpose. The purpose was very clear and specific. It literally was to overturn Dred Scott, which said no black person, free or enslaved, could be a citizen of the United States. And again, unlike immigrants who choose to come here, freed slaves had no homeland to return to, no sovereignty to which they owed allegiance, no citizenship papers from a consulate. They were made stateless by the very nation that held them in bondage. So the 14th Amendment was created exclusively for freed men, not visitors seeking opportunities to come into our country illegally by having a baby here and finding loopholes to stay. And any other interpretation, and all of the interpretations that have subsequently come as a result of the 14th Amendment, in my opinion, should severely be re-examined. Again, if you want to come into our country, do so legally. Should we still allow for individuals to make asylum claims? We should, and they should be investigated vigorously. And if it is determined that there is merit, then they should be permitted to come into the country. But we need to have a process, and it must be ordered. And we must bring in people because we need them, not just because some people want to just let them in. And making the argument around the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment as if the Citizenship Clause is just some great humanitarian philosophical treatise alone and not a specific amendment to redress the grievance against freedmen absolves any person advocating for this of any merit, of any legitimacy to any other thing that they would advocate for beyond this particular moment. So much of what other people try to advocate for themselves, if they're considered a harmed group, always falls on the backs of blacks and the history of slavery. It is not the same, whether it's because of gender or whether you're an illegal immigrant coming from anywhere in the world. You do not have the same rights as black people in this country. And you should not be able to make arguments based on the very, very unique experiences of slaves and their descendants as a argument for your experiences to be granted full citizenship or any other reprisal because of whatever your experiences may have been. They're not the same. They will never be the same. And we have got to stop conflating the two. So yes, birthright citizenship should be ended. You cannot just come into the United States illegally, have a child, and stay. You come in legally, you earn your citizenship, you have your children, they are granted citizenship. But you cannot come illegally, have a child, and then say, well, I want to stay. We have to stop that. And you can't make an argument on the backs of the enslaved to make your case. Your experience is not and will never be the same. I don't give a damn what anybody says about it. It will never be the same. I'm Shermichael Singleton. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comment section below your thoughts on the 14th Amendment and ending birthright citizenship. Thanks for watching. Take care.